Hello friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. And I'm here today to talk about the benefits of Brazil nuts. And just so you know, I have a full series that's up to around 80 videos or so on the benefits of various herbs and more. I'll be putting the link to that full playlist down below. Now, today I'm going to do this in a little bit different order than I normally do when I'm talking about the benefits of something. And that is because Brazil nuts are one of those things that all of a sudden people will come out of the woodwork and say, those are toxic. You shouldn't eat more than 2 per day, blah, 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 blah. And so as a result, I'm actually going to talk about the recommended dosage as far as eating a whole Brazil nut. And I'm going to give you a little bit more information on that. Then I'll get into describing the nutrients and the benefits of including Brazil nuts into your diet. So first off, a lot of places you'll come across will, yes, say 1 to 2 Brazil nuts a day, but you got to look at what those sites are linked to and who they are linked to. The actual dosage, quote unquote, can be up to 6 per day to get the results that you're looking for. But what I really want to talk about is that, and I will link to down below a study that was done, and you can find this on the NIH.gov. So I'm going to put that link in there, and it's a pretty in-depth study where they took a couple of different groups of people. One was a group of obese teens, and trying to see if by feeding them Brazil nuts a certain amount per day, if that would help with their lipid levels in their blood. And they were feeding them 5 to 10 Brazil nuts per day. And they all had positive results. In another group, they were giving them as much as 25 Brazil nuts at one time. And they had also positive results. Nobody suddenly up and died during these studies because they ate more than 2 Brazil nuts per day. So in fact, this is the whole reason I'm doing this particular video, because just like with nutmeg and horseradish and diatomaceous earth and horsetail and you name it, the list goes on and on. There's always going to be somebody that listens to this one voice over here that says you shouldn't eat that or you shouldn't have that. Now maybe you shouldn't, because everybody's going to be different in what they should have and the amount they should have. If you already have high levels of selenium in your blood and you're eating a lot of eggs and other selenium rich foods, then maybe you shouldn't be eating more than 1 Brazil nut per day. But if you're like a lot of people and you need more selenium, maybe you're overweight, maybe you have low thyroid function, eating 2 or more per day can be quite beneficial. And here's the other thing you have to realize too. When they're telling you how much selenium you should have per day and how much you should limit to and why you shouldn't eat more than 2 Brazil nuts per day, that's because they're basing it on studies on selenium supplements. And most of the time, these are often synthetic, not natural. But when you're eating selenium and other such minerals in their whole food forms like Brazil nuts, egg yolks, and more, you're getting it in the natural form where it's already properly combined with the other nutrients to help it work better in your body. So though I do believe in supplementation as needed, I also understand the importance, especially when we're talking about minerals in particular, of getting those in the mineral-rich foods that we have, because they're always properly combined, just like potassium, calcium, and magnesium. You'll almost always find them combined, either calcium with potassium or calcium with magnesium or calcium with magnesium and potassium and manganese. And so all these things help balance each other out so they're utilized properly within the body. All right, now let's get on to the nutrients you're going to find in Brazil nuts, which obviously you know right off the bat, selenium is right at the top, but you'll also get lots of healthy fat, fiber, protein, copper, magnesium, phosphorus, manganese, zinc, calcium, what did I just say? Thiamine and vitamin E. Now, here are some benefits that you can reap from Brazil nuts, assuming, of course, they are right for you. They help support thyroid function. So we're looking specifically at those who are Hashimoto's or have a low functioning thyroid. Brazil nuts can be very helpful, at least 2 per day in this case. They are anti-cancer, and they also help to reduce inflammation. They lift the mood, so they're antidepressant. They boost heart health and also help with digestion. They help to prevent hair loss and treat acne, so really good for the skin. They're immune boosting, and despite the fact that they are high in fat like any other nut, they're good at helping with weight loss, as many healthy fats are helpful with weight loss, believe it or not, which is why the studies were done on obese teens to see how it would help them. They also support brain health and balanced cholesterol. In fact, in the study that I'm going to link to, one thing they found is eating 4 Brazil nuts per day will help to balance cholesterol levels. So the LDL, the HDL, to give you the proper balance. And remember, cholesterol is important. Both LDL and HDL serve a function within our bodies. Proper balance, though, is still important. Now, as far as the Brazil nut themselves, they're really quite interesting. So the seed comes from the fruit of the Brazil nut tree, and that tree can get up to 164 feet tall. And the seeds are inside, they each have their own little shell inside a bigger shell, the fruit of the Brazil nut tree, which is about the size of a coconut, maybe a little bigger, very similar to a coconut. And the reason they're named Brazil nuts is because that is where they're found, is in Brazil. Now, some ways that you can consume them other than just eating them straight from the jar like this. And yes, I store up Brazil nuts and all kinds of nuts, and I vacuum seal them into jars for long-term storage. Vacuum sealing will prevent them from going rancid. One of my favorite things to do with Brazil nuts, besides just eating a few per day, is to make a milk out of them. Oftentimes, sometimes I'll make it by themselves, but usually I like to mix it with something else, and typically that's going to be hazelnuts. So whether you make the milk with just Brazil nuts or you mix it with other nuts, then obviously you have the milk. So I'm not dairy free, but I do sometimes really enjoy a good nut milk. And that's something that, even though I usually prefer my coffee black, when I do have some on hand, I will add it to my coffee because it's such a nice flavor. That's much tastier than dairy milk anyway when it comes to that, at least in my personal opinion. And anyway, but it's more than just the milk you can get from it, whether you use it on your cereal. Oh, the other thing I did with it too was I made a golden milk, and I do have a recipe out. By the time you're seeing this, that recipe will have published. I'll link to that down below. But you can make a Brazil nut milk or Brazil hazelnut milk or any kind of nut milk. But anyway, using that to make the golden milk was quite tasty. But then you can take the pulp that you've strained out of that milk. So this is why I like doing nut milks, because it increases the amount of uses I have for those nuts. And I get more out of them this way. So then I take the pulp of the nut milk, and in the case of Brazil nut milk or Brazil and hazelnut milk, the pulp that's remaining, I simply, because you've already processed it in the blender, so it's already pretty fine. In this case, I just dry it right next to my wood stove. As long as I have a fire going, I'll dry it there. Otherwise, I'll dehydrate it in one of my electric dehydrators. And then I just take that and put it in a jar. That can be then powdered up in a finer form to make a nice flour that you can use in pretty much anything you're going to bake. Or even if you don't dry it, if you use it like within the next 2 days after making your milk, you can use it in muffins, pancakes, and sweetbreads. So I even did a video 2-3 years ago where I made a Brazil nut apple spice bread. So I used some homemade applesauce that I'd canned up. I'd used the leftover pulp from making the milk, and then just created this recipe for a sweetbread, and it turned out really good. So I'll link to that recipe down below. But I also have a recipe that I did cover it in a this and that some time ago, I don't know which one, where I made pancakes only out of nut flour that I made from the pulp of all the various nuts that I had been making milk out of. It was a complete gluten-free, grain-free pancake because I made it only out of the nut flour. And so since I don't know which video that was, I did actually type it up, and so I'll link to the written recipe down below if you'd like to try that. Turned out it was super easy, and it turned out really, really good. So an excellent pancake for sure, especially when you put a little maple syrup or even some of that homemade spruce tip syrup on those. Man, it's tasty. Oh yes, and I almost forgot to mention cookies. You can also use that flour or the pulp, even while it's still wet, in a cookie blend of some kind. And I've also done that before. I don't remember which type of cookies I made. It was a while ago, but I need to do that again at some point. In fact, I'm going to be making some cookies next week, and I already have some dried nut pulp in a jar, and I'm going to powder it up, and then I'm going to use that in the next batch of cookies that I make. Now, I will say it doesn't always work for every type of bread type recipe to use only the nut flour, because in some cases you do need a flour that's going to have some sort of gluten in it or just some other type of flour to help it to hold together better, but it can work well in many things, or at least combined with other types of flours. And then of course, I'm sure that you can make some kind of nut butter out of them if you want and try that. And I haven't done that yet. I don't know that I will. I don't eat a lot of nut butters myself. Sometimes I do, but I still tend to prefer peanut butter when it comes to that. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed my video on Brazil nuts, and don't forget to check out the links I'll be putting in the description box down below by clicking on that long horizontal box. Anywhere on there will open it up. And if you're on a smart device, simply click on the word more down here over in this corner, and that should open that up for you. Any other ideas, suggestions, ways that you like to consume Brazil nuts or use in recipes, please share with us in comments down below, or how have they helped you with any kind of health issues you may have had. All right, well, thanks for watching. Take care, and God bless.